Are you seeking an annulment from the Catholic Church and want to know all the steps involved from start to finish? And are you dealing with someone who's narcissistic or toxic? In this video, I'm going to go through exactly what all the steps are to get a Catholic annulment in the church and what you need to do to prepare for it. And I'm going to share the most important things that you need to do if you are dealing with someone who's narcissistic, abusive, or toxic. So make sure you watch the entire video to get all the important information. And before this video, we had another one that talked about what an annulment is and what it actually means. So if you want to check out that video first, I've linked it in the description below. Let's jump in and name all the steps of an annulment. Okay, so there's quite a few. Got my notes again. There's about 15 steps, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming. The first thing you're going to have to do if you want a Catholic annulment where the tribunal looks at your marriage and deems that there was no sacramental union in place is you have to get a civil divorce first. The annulment tribunal will generally not start your annulment until you've achieved your civil divorce. Now, if you haven't started that process yet, that takes very careful discernment to determine whether or not you should actually go down the divorce route. Of course, I'm a big fan of make the marriage work, but if there are serious issues with the marriage and you are in physical harm, there's abuse involved, that might mean that you're not supposed to be in that marriage, and getting a divorce might be the best option. We're going to put together a video about discerning divorce. We also have a mini course in our support group down below, which you can look at discerning divorce and whether or not you should actually get a divorce. Some Catholic annulment offices might allow you to start the process, but generally they will not formally begin it until you receive your civil annulment because they need that to determine that your marriage is actually going down the process of real separation. And when you're dealing with someone who's very contentious, very narcissistic, a civil divorce can take a long time. It can take as short as 1 year and even up to 10 years or more. So I just want to mentally prepare you guys, like this is not a short-term endeavor. It's not a quick fix. It's going to be the battle of your life. You're going to be dealing with someone who's incredibly manipulative, who's incredibly wants to maintain control and power, will financially abuse you. There might be criminal law involved in the process. So it's going to be very complicated. We're going to talk about that in a separate video, but I just want to preface that. Don't think that getting a divorce is easy, and by no means is it easy if you're dealing with someone who's narcissistic, very contentious, and very toxic. All right, second step is you have to contact the archdiocese. So you have to contact the archdiocese. If you don't know what the contact information is, you can Google search that for your specific diocese and archdiocese location, or you can ask your local priest and say, hey, I'm seeking to do an annulment, and I want to get in touch to start that process formally. What I advise you to do though is make sure you watch this whole video so you're informed of the whole process before starting it. But it's very important to gather all the information before you start talking to them, just so you are very confident in your case and you have a lot of information. Because once you start putting things in writing, that can be somewhat binding and it can be very difficult to change. So gather your information, contact your archdiocese. The third step is to actually make the formal petition. So this means submitting the formal documents to your diocesan tribunal. And this will include a really detailed account of your marriage and all the reasons that you believe it was not valid in the eyes of the church. This is a lot of paperwork. It's usually about 20 pages. A lot of it is quite administrative heavy. So they're going to ask you for questions like your ex's name, baptismal dates, marriage date, family contact information, list of witnesses, your details. They'll ask for a donation. Annulments typically don't have a cost to them, but they do ask for a donation if you're capable of doing that. And something to make note of this petition is it doesn't have to be done with your spouse. So unlike civil divorce, where a lot of times you're going to be interacting with your spouse either directly or indirectly, when it comes to an annulment, they don't require you to ever be in the same room as your spouse or to talk to your spouse or to ever communicate with them, which is really nice because you have that full separation from them. So it is different than the civil proceedings where you may have to been in court with them or in front of a judge with them or on a witness stand in front of your ex-spouse or even in a discovery. Those types of things don't exist in the annulment tribunal. It's a different form of court. And it's not quite like that. So the petition, why I got on that tangent is because you don't need to apply for annulment with your spouse. You can do it unilaterally. They don't need to actually participate through the proceedings in order for the annulment to be granted. But the tribunal is going to try to engage your ex-spouse in order to ensure that they're informed of the proceedings. Because what the tribunal doesn't want to happen is that your ex will say, well, I wasn't informed, therefore I'm going to contend this whole thing, and therefore all that work can be delayed. And sometimes the sad reality is toxic or narcissistic people might do that on purpose in order to frustrate the process or to delay things. And I'm sure if you've gone through a divorce with someone like that, you are very familiar with that, how they like to game the system. So I also mentioned in the step, the petition, you're going to have to submit a list of witnesses. Typically 2 witnesses is a good amount. You can do more than that, but I think 2 is a good, safe amount. Usually they'll ask for someone that's known you for a long time. It can be a family member and like a close friend, maybe a bridesmaid or a groomsman, someone that really knows you for a long time and can give good testimony on what your state was at the time of getting married. We're going to go into details of that on how to pick your witnesses and how you should prepare them in a separate video. But for now, let's continue on with the petition. Okay, so you're going to submit all these documents. Part of the petition includes something called a summary of courtship and marriage. This is a really, really detailed list of questions that actually goes into all the details of what you were like before your marriage, during the marriage, the issues of the marriage, the issues after the marriage, what led you to separation, your family history, any mental health problems, any undiagnosed health issues. It's very, very detailed. This is the part that the tribunal is going to work with you in order to create what's called a libellus or a libellus, which is the next step. Step number 4 is creating the libellus. The tribunal is going to create this formal application which will present your case to the annulment office and to the canon lawyers. This libellus is also going to be submitted to your ex. I can't stress this enough. This is where you need to spend the most amount of time, because you have to be very careful with how you word things. You do not want to be slandering your ex. You do not want to be talking about how horrible their character is. You want to focus on the facts. And it's super important that you tell the tribunal before starting this entire process the type of person that you're dealing with for your physical and psychological safety. And again, we're going to talk about in another video. There's so much information to cover. We got to focus on just the proceedings and the process here. So the libellus is a formal application. Definitely make sure to prepare this very carefully and intentfully. The tribunal is going to work with you. Some people might want to bring in a canon lawyer to review their document. Honestly, it might not be necessary. Again, each case is unique and different. You can kind of hire a canon lawyer just to consult with and see if they have any feedback on your application, but it's not a requirement. Most people don't do that unless they have a very complicated situation. So I'll leave that discretion to you. Okay, next step, you've drafted the libellus. At this point, you're probably about at least 3 months into the process. It does take a while. You're dealing with, administration, and it takes time for things to go back and forth. The libellus is actually sent to your ex. So this is usually a 2-page summary of your whole marriage and what the grounds are for the annulment. The tribunal is going to include the canon law grounds for the annulment. So again, remember, was it entered into freely, faithfully, fully, and fruitfully. And they're going to cite the canon law that is the grounds for why they think the annulment should take place. Your ex is going to have a chance to look at that and to respond to that. And like I mentioned, when you're dealing with toxic people, they probably will not want to get involved with it, or they'll purposely delay the process just to bother you. So just be prepared for that. After you submit your libellus, the next step is your testimony. So you're going to have to give actual oral testimony recorded about your marriage. So how that looks is you're going to meet with typically a priest from the tribunal office. If you live in a small diocese, it can be your local priest, and he's going to ask you a bunch of questions. It'll take about an hour to an hour and a half. He's going to record it on an external recorder and then mail that to the tribunal, and then they're going to transcribe that as part of your evidence. So the best way to prepare for this, again, we'll get into more detail on that on another time, but you want to really prepare during your libellus, because they're going to ask you questions all about your state at the marriage, how everything went down, what was happening the day of the marriage, what was happening hours leading up to the marriage, was there anything weird, anything off, did you notice anything strange about the character of the other party and your ex? It's very, very detailed. You're going to probably cry. It's going to be emotional. Just prepare for that. And the good news is, though, you don't have to give this testimony in front of them. You do it away from your ex. So that is a good thing. And it's worth it. It's very healing, actually. I remember the questions definitely make you think about a lot of, about yourself and about the situation. So after you submit your evidence, then you're going to have to do the same thing with your witnesses. Your witnesses are going to have to provide oral testimony in the same way that you did. The questions are going to be totally different though. And again, they're going to have to be interviewed by usually a priest or someone from the tribunal. They're going to record their evidence, and then it's going to be submitted. So now, if your ex chooses to participate, they're going to have to do the same thing. They're going to have to provide their oral testimony of their answers to those questions, and they're going to have to provide a list of their witnesses, and their witnesses are going to have to provide testimony as well. And this can sometimes delay things, because if someone's not actively participating in the process, they wait for a year or like several months and then decide to participate, that's how things can get slightly delayed. Generally speaking though, an annulment takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years. Most offices like to keep it under a year or like to 18 months max. Sometimes it can take longer, up to 2 years, like I said, if someone is frustrating the process. Okay, so after all the evidence is submitted, a case is published. Now, the beauty of an annulment is that you don't have to do this work. The office does this for you, which is really, really nice. If you've gone through a divorce, you know how much work it is. This is way easier. And if you've gone through a divorce with someone who's toxic, I mean, that's where the most spiritual healing and work was probably done. This is going to be a piece of cake, honestly, at this point. So the case is published while after everything has been transcribed and a trial book is created. You don't need to be involved in this process, but you do have a chance to review the evidence and make any changes if you want. I would say if you feel really comfortable and confident in the evidence that you provided and in how you've prepared your witnesses and the grounds for annulment, it might not be necessary for you to review the evidence. And again, you can ask the tribunal their thoughts on that. They can't really give you advice, but they can advise whether or not it's necessary. In most cases, people usually don't review the evidence. If you really feel like you have the truth of why you're seeking annulment, I would say trust that your evidence provided is solid, and reviewing the other opposing side's evidence might be just way too triggering. But I'm going to leave that up to you. If you want to do that, you can. It might delay things quite a bit. It also might be incredibly triggering, but it might be very healing. So that's up to you how you want to do that. Then we're at step number 11 already. I know it's quite a while. The case is actually conducted. So like I said earlier, unlike a civil divorce where you have to appear with your ex and provide testimony like in front of a judge or a mediator or usually with a third party, everything is done via writing and oral testimony with the marriage tribunal. So the case is conducted and the file is given to an advocate who will make the argument for the annulment based on the information gathered from your testimonies. So they're going to argue why the annulment should take place based on what you said. Now, the marriage tribunal is going to appoint someone called the defender of the bond, which is step number 12. And the defender of the bond is going to argue why the marriage should actually exist. In the Catholic Church and in a Catholic marriage, or in a marriage generally, the Catholic Church will look at it as the marriage is valid unless proven otherwise. It's almost like innocent until proven guilty. They see it as you have a valid marriage unless we can prove that you don't. So the defender of the bond is going to argue why the marriage is in fact valid and why you still do have a sacramental marriage, even if you've had a divorce. Remember, sacramental annulment and a divorce are two separate things. You can receive a divorce, but not receive an annulment. We'll chat about that another time. Step number 13, bear with me guys, we're almost at the end here. The case is scheduled for judgment. So this is where the canon lawyers come together and they assess the whole entire trial book and all the information that was presented to determine whether or not your marriage is actually deemed nullified by the church. Then step number 14, you're going to get a final decree. This will be the final declaration as to whether you received the annulment or not. And if you received it, there's about a 30-day waiting period before it's official. This is just in case either party wants to appeal the process, which can still happen. And that might actually happen if you're dealing with a highly contentious person. They might try to appeal it just to be difficult, to get back at you, or for whatever reason. So just prepare yourself for that. And then if those 30 days have passed, you will get an official annulment, which means that your marriage never was valid in the eyes of the Catholic Church. You can receive another marriage in the Catholic Church, which is great. And then if you didn't get the annulment granted, the next step would be to appeal that. And at that stage, I'd probably suggest seek a canon lawyer to assess and dig into that a little bit deeper. The tribunal will give you some feedback in terms of why the annulment was not granted and why they see the marriage as being valid. I do know one person actually that didn't receive the annulment the first time and they had to appeal it, and then they did get it. But it took it took a little bit of time. So this entire process is about 1 to 2 years, like I mentioned before. Now, I promised you guys the single most important thing that you need to do before applying for annulment is to prepare. This is essential because whatever you put in writing is going to be shared with your ex-spouse, and it's going to be part of your trial book, whatever testimony you give. So it's super important that you prepare in advance and really reflect on what grounds you're seeking for an annulment. Really go back to the time of your wedding, leading up to that point. What information was there? What was not there? And I really suggest watching the previous video we did about what the tribunal looks for an annulment and what a marriage actually is. Watch that video because it'll walk you through exactly what the tribunal is looking for. So don't rush before submitting anything. Take your time with this process. I know it can be very emotionally difficult and challenging, but just know that this process is so much easier than the civil divorce proceedings. It's totally worth it. You will receive a lot of healing graces when you go through this process. You'll learn a lot about yourself and where you need to heal as well. And again, God is wise. This is a way for us to seek deeper intimacy with Him and deeper healing as we go into the wounds that maybe we don't really want to go into, but it's really good for our character building and for our relationship with the Lord. I really don't want you guys to risk a failed annulment simply because you weren't fully prepared. So do watch this again so you know all the steps. And we are putting together an annulment mini course series, which will be linked down below. And that will walk you through each step in great detail and give you examples of the specific questions that are asked. I forgot to mention that this lovely artwork is by an artist called Monica Van Wollen. I've linked that also down below. I think it's so stunning. It's called Tongues of Fire, which is pretty cool. And like, share, subscribe. I know YouTube videos say that all the time, but it's important so that when we do the next series in the video, you get notified in your YouTube inbox. So please do that. And it also helps the channel get more awareness because, as you know, Catholic content is not too favorable by YouTube, but the truth is important and we want to spread the good news. So talk to you guys soon. The next video, we're going to be talking about what the difference is between divorce and annulment. So check that out.